The coffee is cold by the time you notice it. You've been sitting at the same desk for 6 hours, working the same spreadsheet you've worked every Tuesday for the past 4 years. Column A, column B, the cursor blinks. Outside, the city hums with a kind of indifference that stopped bothering you a long time ago. You stopped expecting anything to interrupt this life. That was the deal you made with yourself. Stability, routine, the quiet, manageable kind of small. Then your phone rings. You don't recognize the number. You almost don't answer. But something in you, the part that hasn't fully surrendered yet, picks up. The voice on the other end is calm, precise. A man who speaks like every word has already been billed. We need you in our offices in the next 40 minutes. You've been selected as the executor of a discretionary fund. The amount is $1 trillion. You have 72 hours to deploy it. You think it's a joke. You say so. He doesn't laugh. There is a car outside your building. The terms will be explained on arrival. If you're not in the vehicle in 5 minutes, the opportunity passes to the next name on the list. You look out the window. There is in fact a black car idling at the curb. You grab your jacket. The building they take you to has no signage. 42nd floor. Clean lines, muted light, the kind of silence that costs money to maintain. 3 people are waiting in a room that looks like it was designed to make you feel both important and small. One of them slides a document across the table. You read it 3 times. $1 trillion. 72 hours. Full deployment required. No recycling of funds back into the originating accounts. Every dollar must move into assets, infrastructure, institutions, or direct capital transfers before the clock expires. The purpose, as stated, is stress testing global capital absorption capacity on behalf of an unnamed sovereign research body. You will be monitored, you will have a team, and when the 72 hours end, everything you've deployed becomes permanent, no takebacks, no reversals. Why me, you ask? The woman across from you, silver-haired, reading glasses on a chain she hasn't touched, looks at you the way people look at a door they're about to open, because you have no position, no allegiances. No financial footprint worth compromising. You are, for our purposes, clean. You sign the document at 11:47 p.m. By midnight, you have a war room, 12 analysts, 2 legal teams, a logistics coordinator who speaks in acronyms you're still learning. Screens cover every wall. The number sits at the top of the central display in white digits, $1 trillion. It doesn't feel real. It looks like a rendering error. Your first instinct is to be careful. Smart. Methodical, you think about hospitals, infrastructure, clean water systems in developing nations. The things people say they do with impossible money when they don't actually have it. Your lead analyst, a man named Darius, pulls up the first tranche breakdown. Healthcare infrastructure across sub-Saharan Africa, full deployment across 300 facilities, supply chain, equipment, staffing commitments, gets you to about 40 billion. That's 4% of the fund. You have 68 hours left after that. We need to move faster. Faster. The word lands differently when the number has 12 zeros. You authorize the 40 billion. It takes 11 minutes to process our 6. You've deployed 220 billion. The decisions stop feeling like decisions and start feeling like pressure. Every choice displaces another. You fund desalination infrastructure across coastal drought zones, 43 billion. You capitalize 3 regional development banks in Southeast Asia, 60 billion. You push 80 billion into emergency housing construction pipelines across 7 countries, pre-approved shovel-ready projects that have been waiting on funding for years. Every room you walk into, people are moving, phones ringing, screens refreshing. The number drops in real time, and watching it fall is both terrifying and addictive. You stop sleeping at hour 9 by hour 14. You're making decisions in 30-second windows. Darius puts a proposal in front of you. A direct sovereign debt restructure for 4 mid-income nations currently locked in IMF cycles that are bleeding their public health and education budgets. It would cost 120 billion. It would also trigger political reactions from 3 major creditor nations who would see it as destabilizing. Destabilizing, you ask. Diplomatically uncomfortable, not catastrophically. You think for exactly 20 seconds. You authorize it. Darius nods and turns away. No applause, no celebration. That's the thing nobody tells you about operating at scale. It doesn't feel powerful. It feels like being responsible for a dam that has already been opened. Hour 22. You're 560 billion in. You're sitting in a side room eating a sandwich you can't taste when one of the legal team members comes in and closes the door quietly. Her name is Priya. She has not closed the door quietly before. We have a problem, she says. 2 of the capital transfers, totaling 74 billion, have been flagged by 2 separate regulatory bodies. Not blocked, flagged, but the flags will generate inquiries. Inquiries become investigations. Investigations have timelines that extend well beyond your 72-hour window. What happens to us after the 72 hours? You ask. She looks at you carefully. The document you signed confers executor liability for any transfers under regulatory review. You sit with that for a moment. $74 billion of potential personal liability. You didn't read that clause carefully enough. You read it, but you didn't feel it. That's the gap between understanding something and being inside it. Can we redirect those funds before the flags escalate? We have a 14-hour window. then we redirect, you pull the transfers. You rebuild them through different channels, legally clean, slower but solid. It costs you 9 hours of recalculation. It costs you 2 members of the legal team who disagree with the approach and walk out. You don't have time to process either of those things. Hour 31. 700 billion deployed. You're running on something that isn't quite adrenaline anymore. It's closer to obligation. Like you've started something that now has its own gravity and you are simply the nearest available object. A proposal comes in from the logistics team. A direct capital injection into 4 of the world's largest green energy transition projects. Combined, they represent the largest private-to-infrastructure energy pivot in history. Combined cost, 190 billion. The projects are real. The need is real. The impact horizon is 20 years. You won't be there in 20 years to see it. That's the part they don't prepare you for, making decisions whose consequences you will never witness. You're not building something you'll walk through. You're building something that exists entirely downstream from you. You authorize a tower 44. 912 billion deployed. You have 88 billion left in 19 hours. The room is quieter now. The frantic pace of the first 2 days has compressed into something more deliberate. You're closing gaps, filling tranches that came in under estimate. The last stretch is harder because the easy infrastructure plays are gone. What's left requires judgment calls about contested priorities. Education versus early childhood nutrition programs, urban transit versus rural connectivity, direct cash transfers versus institutional investment. Nobody can make these calls for you. That's what the room keeps reminding you, silently, every time they put a document in front of you and step back. You split the remaining 88 billion across 12 separate initiatives. You take longer on each one. You stop asking Darius to validate your reasoning. You already know what the data says. What you're wrestling with now isn't analysis, it's the weight of choosing one thing over another when both things matter. Hour 71. 53 minutes remaining, $847,000 left. It's almost funny. You spend $1 trillion and you're down to less than $1 million, staring at the counter like it's the last question on a test you weren't sure you'd pass. Darius asks if you want to push the remainder into a donor-advised fund as a buffer vehicle. You tell him no. You wire it directly to a network of community health clinics in 3 cities you've never visited. No infrastructure play. No strategic leverage, just buildings where people go when they're sick and can't afford to be. The counter hits 0 at 11:03 p.m. The room doesn't erupt. There's no ceremony. Priya confirms deployment completion on the legal side. Darius closes his laptop. The screens go dark one by one. You're in the car going back before you realize you don't know what back means anymore. The city looks the same. The lights are the same. The people moving through the streets at midnight have no idea that the architecture of the world around them shifted in the last 3 days. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in ways that will compound over years and decades, in ways that can't be traced back to a single room on the 42nd floor of a building with no name. You'll never be able to explain what happened here. Not in a way that makes sense over dinner or in casual conversation. The scale breaks language. It breaks the normal grammar of how people talk about cause and effect. Your phone buzzes. It's Priya. *3 of the regulatory inquiries have been reopened. Call me when you're ready. You look at the message for a long time. Ready, that's an interesting word. You weren't ready when the phone rang 6 days ago. You weren't ready when you signed the document. You weren't ready for any single moment of the last 72 hours. You reply tomorrow morning. You put the phone in your pocket. Outside, the city keeps moving. Indifferent, continuous. And somewhere in the machinery of it, in hospitals not yet built, in pipes carrying water that doesn't exist yet, in classrooms and power grids and debt structures slowly unwinding, something you decided is already beginning. You didn't change the world, but you changed enough of it that the world will change around it, and nobody will ever come looking for a thank you. The invoice was already paid. The only currency left is what it cost you, the sleep, the certainty, the version of yourself that thought scale was something that happened to other people. You close your eyes in the back of the car. Tomorrow, Priya is waiting. The inquiries are open. The system that handed you $1 trillion is patient, and it has a long memory, and it does not consider your role finished simply because the clock ran out. It never lets you just walk away. That was always the clause you didn't read carefully enough.